Joseph Alexander Mabry Jr. was born to state legislator Joseph Alexander Mabry Sr. and Alice Hare Scott on January 26, 1826. Mabry was predeceased by his father, who died in a duel in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and was left to be raised by his oldest brother George, builder of the Mabry Hood House. Mabry was a businessman from the beginning. In the early 1850s, Mabry formed a land-holding company that speculated land in the Knoxville area. He and his brother-in-law, William G. Swan, donated what is now Market Square in Knoxville. It was originally given, as to the city to be established, as a farmer's market, where farmers could sell produce. While extending his hand to help the farmers, he was also using his connections with the Tennessee legislature to obtain funding for a railroad construction. Over the years he acquired millions of dollars in bonds for the Knoxville and Kentucky Railroad. By the time it was actually placed in receivership, it had been loaned $2.3 million by the state. Mabry became the president of this railroad in 1858 and began expansion to Clinton and built the Mabry-Hazen House on a hill in East Knoxville. As a side occupation, Mabry was famous for his stock of prized race horses, which raced all across the South. He also served on the board of trustees for East Tennessee University, now University of Tennessee. Mabry seemed the perfect citizen of Knoxville, Tennessee. However, Mabry was continuously torn between support of the Confederates and the Unionists. By the early 1860s, Mabry was one of Knoxville's largest slaveholders, and like every other Democrat of that time, he was in support of secession. He was a man torn between angrily arguing for secession and one that was looking for a peaceful resolution to the secession crisis. In April 1861, he supported pro-Unionist Andrew Johnson by chasing away a Confederate band whose aim was to interrupt Johnson's speech. However, the next day, Unionist Charles Douglas was shot by a Confederate soldier on Gay Street and Mabry was charged as an accessory. Later that year, William Parson Brownlow, the vitriolic pro-Union editor of the Knoxville Whig, was jailed by Confederate authorities on charges of treason. Every other Confederate celebrated the arrest and called for Brownlow to be hanged. Mabry, on the other hand, spoke on Brownlow's behalf and managed to secure his release. This favor was not forgotten, because during the Reconstruction period Mabry was one of few ex-Confederates spared during Brownlow's regime. During the war, on the other hand, Mabry gave generously to the Confederate uniform and tent supply. He claimed to have donated $100,000, but historians reported that may have been close to $1 million. After the war, Mabry continued to champion the railroad construction industry, working alongside ex-Confederate Charles McClung McGee to extend the railroad to modern Caryville, providing invaluable railroad access to the lucrative coal fields of eastern Anderson County. By 1869, the railroad went bankrupt and Mabry's fortunes began to decline, until he fell deeply into debt. After his railroad went bankrupt, Baxter, a lawyer Mabry consistently quarreled with, sued Mabry, claiming Mabry had practically pillaged the company. They filed libel and counter-libel suits on each other until finally in 1870, Mabry approached Baxter and shot him in the wrist. For reasons unknown, Baxter never pressed charges. His behavior continued to be called into question when his son Will was killed in a barroom fight by Constable Lusby, who was arrested but acquitted of the charge in April 1882, leaving the Mabry family outraged. For several weeks, the two families exchanged threats until a violent brawl erupted in the Knox County courthouse. Lusby and his father were shot and killed, and Mabry and his son Joseph Mabry III were charged for the murders but were acquitted. Later that same year, Mabry got into a quarrel with Mechanics National Bank president Thomas O'Connor over land he sold to him. 2 days later, O'Connor spotted Mabry walking down Gay Street, pulled out a double-barreled shotgun, and emptied both barrels into Mabry, killing him instantly. Joseph Mabry III, hearing the commotion, rushed to the scene. Upon seeing his father's body, he too pulled out a gun and started shooting. As O'Connor fell, he fired one last shot, killing young Mabry. Mabry and his son, the latter representing the third consecutive generation of the family killed in a gunfight, were buried next to Will Mabry in Old Gray Cemetery after a funeral at the Mabry-Hazen House on October 20, 1882.